Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, this is going to be episode 8 of our Midnight Preparation series, and this is going to be our deep dive into leatherworking. We are getting super close to release now. We are just a few days away, so hopefully this video, if you are somebody who's going into leatherworking, can hopefully bring your mind at ease. And for all of the blacksmiths out there, don't worry, your video is coming very soon. We will have all the crafting professions covered by release. But of course, you guys know the drill by now. If you've seen these videos, we're going to be going over the pros and cons of leatherworking, talking about the different recipes, just an overview of the profession. We're going to be talking about how to level up the profession, and then of course go through all the different specialization builds and things you should consider depending on what sort of gold making you want to do. As always, there will be timestamps down below, so feel free to skip around to whatever portion of the video you want to check out. And also, just a heads up, I am updating my Midnight spreadsheet. That is the spreadsheet screenshot that you see in all of these profession breakdown videos, and that has been linked in the description, so feel free to check that out. I highly recommend to bookmark it, because whenever release does go out, that's going to have like the disenchant shuffle calculators and all of that. But everybody, thank you guys so much for watching, and let's dive right into leatherworking. Now, to just kind of get it out of the way, I think the biggest pro to leatherworking is that honestly, there's not that many changes in sort of overall concept of leatherworking from the War Within to Midnight. Now, there are some new recipes here and there, and some specializations have been moved around, but in general, leatherworking is just leatherworking. If you're somebody who loves to do work orders, so whether you have a good reputation on your realm or that's something you definitely want to get started in Midnight, you have leather gear as well as mail gear, meaning you have a ton of options available to you. Honestly, the hardest thing about work orders, if that's the route you're going, is probably going to be which specialization, either leather or mail, or which slot of armor that you want to focus on first, and of course you can go and look at best in slot guides to figure that out. Additionally, if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily want to craft armor, but you still want to do crafting orders, then you have profession equipment. Leatherworking makes a lot of profession equipment for itself as well as other professions, so that is something you can definitely look forward to as well, especially if you're already doing that same sort of setup with profession tools on other professions. And then even if you're a mass crafter or somebody who wants to focus on consumables / reagents, somebody like myself, you have a handful of reagents as well as consumables like drums and armor kits that can keep you busy as well. Now, you might not have as many options as a profession like jewel crafting, where 99% of the recipes are built behind gems, which of course are sold on the region-wide auction house, but still, even so, you should have enough to keep you busy and at least bring a little bit of gold in and kind of diversify your auction house stock. But with that being said, honestly, the only con that I have is, like I said before, there's not a ton of consumable options. So for example, if you go into armor kits and then armor kits just don't end up being profitable, yes, you could pivot to reagents or something like that, but let's say both of those fall, you don't have that much to fall back to, unless of course you go into work orders or some sort of other category of item. But diving into the game, first of all, let's quickly cover profession equipment, and like I said before, leatherworkers make a lot of profession gear for other professions as well as themselves. Your accessory as well as your tool is going to come from blacksmithing, so if you already have another blacksmith, then perfect, you can potentially craft those yourself or simply order them through the work order system, and then leatherworkers will have the opportunity to craft their second accessory for themselves. So if you are somebody who is going to spec into equipment, that's something that you could self-sustain, or yet again, just order it through the work order system. But since we have the chart on screen, quickly just take a look at how many orange items there are on this chart, and that means that they are crafted by leatherworking. So alchemy, jewel crafting, blacksmithing, leatherworking, engineering, herbalism, and skinning, and not only skinning, but both accessories of skinning both come from leatherworking, meaning a lot of people in a lot of professions will be relying on gear from you in order to have the best crafts possible. So if you are somebody who wants to get into profession equipment crafting, leatherworking is definitely a very good option. But with that being said, let's quickly go and dive in to some recipes. Up first, we have our basic trainer learned recipes, and you will unlock all of your trainer learned recipes at level 50. Now, there are two exceptions. There are two housing decor that come from your profession trainer that you get at 80, so you will have to level up a little bit more to get those, but all of your generic items like basic drums, basic leveling gear, all of that, you'll get it at level 80. Up first, we have our 4 crafting reagents. These are used in basically all of your leatherworking recipes, and the first one we have is the infused scale woven hide. You'll see that some of these will be probably pretty expensive, with this one requiring 2 of each mote. So we have the mote of light, the primal energy, pure void, wild magic, and we also require 1 majestic hide, which is an epic skinning item, which will likely be pretty expensive, especially at the start of the expansion. And then it also takes in 1 scale woven hide, which is actually crafted by leatherworkers, and you'll see that it takes in 1 void tempered hide as well as 1 void tempered plating, and this is just some skinning items that you get, so you can easily buy this off the auction house. Next up, we have our Silver Moon weapon wrap right here, which is just another reagent that you'll be used in a lot of crafts, and you once again will be required to use a few motes, so 2 motes of light, a carving canine, which yet again is just another skinning drop, and then your void tempered hide right here. And then lastly, we have our final reagent, the Cinderai armor banding, and this requires 2 mote of lights, 1 fantastic fur, and 1 void tempered plating. And these are going to be your 4 main kind of big high-end crafting reagents for leatherworking. Up next, we have our simple drum, so you'll notice that this doesn't require quality, and this is just going to increase your haste by 15 for all the people in your raid/party, and this simply requires just 1 mote of void, 1 fantastic fur, 1 peerless plumage, which once again are just kind of those obscure skinning drops, and then 10 void tempered leather, which is your basic leather reagent, and then also 10 void tempered scales, which is your other basic skinning/leatherworking reagent. So for all your low-end crafts, you'll kind of see these scales and leathers, and then for the more higher end, you'll see the plating, and then you'll also see the hide. So that's kind of your tiering of skinning items, and then of course you also have the epic skinning items like this majestic hide that you see right here. Moving on, we have our basic or kind of our leveling armor kit. So this one necessarily isn't very fancy, but you'll see that it increases your agility or strength by 16. It requires 5 silverleaf thread, which is just a simple vendor item, 1 peerless plumage, and then 50 of your basic leather and scales as well. Then moving on, we have our basic leveling gear. So this is going to be the BOE gear that you can sell on the auction house. And we have our leather versions as well as our mail versions as well. And you'll notice that the crafting recipes are pretty much the same across the board. But for leather ones, you're going to require more leather than scales. And for the mail armor, it's going to be the exact opposite. For example, you'll take a look at this hood right here. This is the leather helmet, and you'll see that it takes in 40 leather as well as 20 scales to make. And if we take a look at the mail helmet, you'll see that it takes 40 scales and 20 leather. So it's just the complete opposite. Now, some of these do require a handful of other reagents. So this one, for example, the pants requires fantastic fur. The shoulders require the carving canines, so some of these do require some extra reagents, but in general, it's just going to use a lot of leather and scales. I'll quickly kind of flip through if you do want to pause and look at any of the reagents, but for the male ones, you're looking at the exact same thing, just with the leather and the scales flipped. Moving on, we have our profession equipment, and this is going to be all of the green version, so the BOE version that yet again you can sell on the auction house. So we have the smith's apron for blacksmithing, we have the cap for alchemy, we have the jeweler's apron for jewel crafting, we have the tinker's handguard for engineering, we have the hide worker's cover for leatherworking, we have the skinner's backpack for skinning, the botanist's satchel for herbalism, and lastly we have the skinner's cap for skinning. So yet again, there's a lot of options here if you are going to go into profession equipment. And in terms of trainer learned recipes, that's it. Like I said, there are 2 housing decor recipes. If I open up the trainer right now, you'll see them right here. So you will unlock these at 80, but in terms of kind of like your generic, just overall leatherworking crafts, you'll have them all by 50, and there's really not that much. Now continuing on to our more specialized items, so these are either coming from vendors, coming from specializations, world drops, things like that, we have our optional reagents. Up first, we have the Blessed Pango Charm, and you'll see here this is another embellishment. All 3 of these are actually embellishments, so feel free to pause if you want to see what sort of bonus this gives, but for example, this one right here comes from a quest. Then you have the Devouring Banding, which yet again is another embellishment. Feel free to pause if you want to see what it does, and you'll see that this comes from Specializations. Then lastly, you have the Primal Spore Binding, the third embellishment on the list, and this is a world drop, or a boss drop I should say, from that boss right there. I'm not even going to go and try to pronounce that name. But between the three of them, you'll see a handful of skinning mats. So you'll see here the canine as well as the plumage, as well as the tempered hide is all used in this recipe. The banding uses one of the armor banding, so that's a leatherworking reagent right there. And lastly, the spore binding requires that scale woven hide, which is another leatherworking recipe. Moving on, we have our two higher end armor kits. You're going to want to check the best in slot list to figure out which armor kit is used the most, but right here we have the Blood Knights one, so feel free to pause if you want to see what it does, but you'll see that this requires some armor bindings as well as the scale woven hide, as well as some other items from some other professions, but this right here comes from Specializations. Then lastly, you have the Forest Hunter's armor kit. Yet again, feel free to pause, and this comes from Renown, so you'll actually have to get your Renown up and then purchase it with Artisan Moxie. Next, we have all of our leather armor. So remember, there is unembellished gear, meaning that you can apply your own sort of embellishment and all of that to it. And then you have your special embellished gear. So up first, we have the Hex Woven Strand, which you'll see that this is one of those pre-embellished items. It has a unique equipped ability, and this is going to be a little bit expensive, requiring a lot of scales, leather, one armor binding, one scale woven hide, as well as the Tormented item and some motes of magic. Then we have the Road Walker set, which is a leatherworking embellished set. You'll see here that this is uniquely equipped and you need to wear 2 of them in order to get the set bonus. So feel free, you can take a look at the crafting recipe. This also is a Renown recipe. And then we have the Road Walker's Insurance, which is a boss drop right here. And then lastly, we have the Swift Grips, which is actually a world drop from Heavy Trunks. So if you are somebody who's not going to want to purchase the recipe off the auction house, you are going to have to get out there and do some activities in hopes for these recipes to drop. Then all of these Silver Moon Agent recipes that you see right here are just your basic high-end unembellished gear, where you can apply your own embellishment if that is what you desire. And then lastly, we have the World Tree Root Wraps, which is hard to say, and this is the last piece of leather embellishment gear that also has a special bonus, and this yet again comes from Renown. All of your basic unembellished pieces will come from Specializations. Then we have the exact same thing, but for male armor. So we have the Axe Flinging Bands, which is just an embellished piece of gear. This comes from Heavy Trunks. Then we have the Farsighter's gear, and this is all of your unembellished basic male gear. So you'll gain all of this from Specializations. So you have the full set of that right here. Then you have the Ranger General's Grips, which is another embellished piece of gear. And lastly, you have the World Tender set, which yet again, you need 2 of the pieces to get the set gear. So you have the Bark Clasp right here. Feel free to pause if you want to see that set bonus. And this is another boss drop. Then we have the Root Slippers, which comes from Heavy Trunks. And lastly, we have the Trunk Plate, which fittingly does not come from Heavy Trunks, but comes from a boss drop yet again. Moving on, we're almost done. We have our PvP sets of armor, so we have the leather armor as well as the mail armor, and like all PvP items, this simply can be purchased at the PvP vendor. Then second to last, you have all of your profession equipment. So you have your rare versions right here. So you have the Eversong Hunters as well as all of the Sindorai pieces, and these are going to be your rare qualities. And then you have your Thalazin, which is going to be your epic equipment right there. Now, something I need to bring up, because this was a recent hotfix, and this is the first video that I'm recording since the hotfix, is that there has been a change to profession equipment. Throughout this entire process, we have been wondering, okay, is Profession Moxie ever going to be added to Profession equipment? Because, you know, in past expansions, we've needed Artisan Acuity, we've needed Artisan Metal to craft Profession equipment. It was basically an artificial time gate, so we couldn't get the best gear possible right away. And you'll notice here is that, yes, Moxie is still not used, but we are now requiring 20 fused vitalities for each of these crafts. If you take a look at all of my other videos, you will see that these require 1 each, and they have just recently been hotfixed to 20. To those who are unfamiliar with this item, this is a bind on pickup item, and this comes from the Abundance World event. I'm not going to go too much into detail because this is not an event video, but basically there is an abundant harvest event that you can only do 8 times per week, and it is a group event similar to kind of like the theater event where everybody does a bunch of activities, and as you get up the tier levels, you'll get kind of like different bags of items. Basically, if you get tier 3 or you do the best that you can in this event, you will get 900 of this currency. So if you do 8 runs and you get 900 currency every single time, you will get 7,200 abundance, which then you can spend at the abundance vendor. That is where you will buy this fused vitality item, and currently it costs 400 abundance. So if you have 7,200 abundance, 400 each for each fused item, that means you can get 18 vitality. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this 8 times per week is an account thing or a character-based thing. I also don't know if there's any sort of bonus abundance you get by doing other objectives or through weekly quests, things like that. But in general, if you're thinking about it, if that's like around 20 or so vitality a week, that is 1 tool a week. Yet again, don't know if this is a per character basis. If it is per character, I'm not sure if abundance is warbound, meaning I'm not sure if you can warband transfer it between characters and kind of just send it all to one character to get as much tools as possible. Yet again, I'm not 100% sure, but just something I wanted to make sure you knew, that there is potentially a pretty big time gate on these items now. So they definitely have upped that scale to, I think, improve the time gating ability of profession tools. So it looks like Moxie is not going to be used, but we are going to be gated a bit with these fused items. Now, with that being said, going back to leatherworking, if you are somebody who is going to specialize in crafting this equipment, you have a decision to make. You'll notice that these rare items right here come from the vendor, and you need to spend Artisan Moxie in order to unlock them. But if you take a look at the epic ones, you see they also come from the same vendor. So you're gonna have to decide, okay, do I spend 150 Moxie getting the rare version of the jeweler's cover, and then spend another 150 to get the epic version so I can sell both? Because, you know, people who don't have the fused items yet are gonna want the rare version, and of course people with the fused items are gonna want the epic version. So you have to make the decision, okay, do I want both types? Or do I choose, okay, I'm just going to craft the rare one or just craft the epic one, but then I could buy, 2 epic recipes instead of just 1 and 1 rare. So that will be a decision you need to make for leatherworking if this is something you're going to go into. Then lastly, the final set of items that you have is just housing decor. Like I said, 2 of these do come from the trainer, while everything else comes from a variety of sources. But we have a fur rug right here, we have a canopy bed, we have a wall shelf, we have a throw pillow, we have a table, another rug, and lastly, we have a chair. So if you are somebody who likes to do house decor and you want to start farming lumber for it, these are definitely some good options for you as well. Now, with recipes out of the way, let's quickly talk about leveling leatherworking, and this is actually very straightforward. Unironically, Blizzard did this, not me, but you're going to be able to hit level 67 very easily. The reason why I say this is as you level up the profession, you're going to unlock different versions of the leveling gear, and you're going to continue to craft those different versions all the way to 67. The reason why we stop at this number and not 70 is because at 67, the last little bit of gear is going to turn green, meaning you have a low chance of gaining skill, meaning if you really want to, and gold is no objection, you can continue to mass craft this to 70, but I just kind of stopped here because these can get a little bit expensive depending on the price of leather and scales, and you don't really need those 3 points that badly. So that's just personal preference. But from 1 to 67, it's going to be very simple. In terms of what items to choose, remember, just take a look at the scales versus leather and choose whatever is cheaper. For example, if leather is way cheaper, then just go and mass craft all of the leather armor because you'll be using primary leather. And then of course, if the scales end up cheaper, then you can use mail armor, and because that requires more scales than leather. So that really just comes down to the cost of materials when you level up leatherworking. Now, past that, once you see we're at 67, in terms of trainer learned recipes, your only options are these either pants or hood from either mail or leather, and like I said, that's going to get you to 70. So after 70, you definitely need a game plan. And this is where you kind of have to be careful. Theoretically, you shouldn't have to rush to 100 unless you're trying to guarantee a specific craft super fast, but you'll just have to choose what sort of gold making technique you want to do and use that to get to 100. For example, if you're somebody who's going to craft profession equipment, you're going to want to unlock one of these profession equipment recipes and then just mass craft it all the way to 100. If you are somebody who doesn't mind spending gold, theoretically you can unlock one of the rare pieces because none of these items are time gated, buy them and just craft them all to 100. You can send them to alts or, have alts request them so then you can have them on alts, or you can disenchant them for a little bit of items back. But if you are somebody who just wants to hit 100 as fast as possible, that's definitely a method you can choose. Of course, if you're going into armor crafting, then you can simply unlock one of these armor pieces, and as you do crafting orders, you'll passively get to 100. You can even unlock one of the optional reagents or armor kits and mass craft those to 100. And even if you want to take it slow and steady, you can do housing decor. As you get lumber and as you craft these different decor, that'll also slowly bring you to 100. So it really just comes down to how fast you want to get to 100 and also your gold making methods. But whichever method you choose and what sort of item you unlock, they should all be a pretty good path to hit max level. But with all of that out of the way, let's quickly talk about specializations, and I feel like I'm a broken record probably, but I truly do mean it. Leatherworking specializations are extremely simple. First things first, we have the Learned Leatherworker tree, and this is going to be the fundamental tree for all of your profession stats. If we take a look, you'll see that this first node right here is going to give you a bunch of ingenuity as well as concentration buffs. You'll see when you unlock it, you'll be able to consume less concentration when crafting different items. Then, of course, even less concentration, and lastly, you'll get a speed boost as well as 45 ingenuity. To the right, you'll see the multicraft node. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's going to give you a bunch of multicraft for every point that you put in, as well as some other bonuses like granting more items whenever you proc, kind of the standard multicraft tree that we've seen with all of the other professions. On the other side, to the left, we have Waning Waste, which is your resourcefulness node. So the exact same thing, but for resourcefulness. So every point you put in, you're going to get a bunch of resourcefulness as well as different stats. So this one's going to refund more items, give you more resourcefulness, etc., all the way through. And then something pretty unique to leatherworking is not only does leatherworking have one ingenuity node, but it actually has two. And so this bottom node right here, Concentrated Crafter, is going to refund additional concentration whenever you have a breakthrough through ingenuity. And this is just going to increase that buff as well as increase your ingenuity. So an important thing to note here is that none of these four things give skill. So if you are somebody who is, let's say, mass crafting and you want to have as much skill as possible, these are not going to be the nodes for you, but these are still very important for those bonus stats. So if you are somebody who, let's say, is going the mass crafting route and you're going to want the max skill, while you might not necessarily want concentration, you're still going to want multicraft for all of the multicraft procs, or let's say you're guaranteeing armor, you're still going to want resourcefulness for the resourcefulness procs. And then if you are somebody who is going to set up leatherworking for concentration crafts, you're going to want the middle node as well as the bottom node to have as much concentration refunds and lessen how much is used per craft. Moving on, we have our armor trees, and leatherworking and mail is set up the exact same way. They're just separated into two trees. So this one right here, lasting leather, is going to be all of your leather armor, and this is separated by a slot. So the top one is going to give you a bunch of skill when crafting any sort of leather armor. You'll be able to unlock the ability to use optional reagents, gain a bunch of other different bonuses like resourcefulness, things like that. But in general, this is mostly going to give you skill. At the end, you also get a crafting speed buff, which is just very nice. From here, you're going to want to choose what sort of slot you want to go to. And so if you go to the right, you're going to be able to unlock more skill for hands, feet, legs, and waist. And if you go to the left, you'll be able to increase the skill for chest, heads, shoulders, and wrist. So definitely figure out what sort of slot you want to go into before you pick one of these. In this case, let's say you want to go for chest pieces, so you're going to want to go to the left side, and as you put points in, you're going to gain skill for that, and then just some other stats as well, very similar to the top node. And then lastly, you want to pick the actual specific armor slot. So for example, if we pick chest, you're going to want terrific tunics. And the first time you unlock this, you're going to gain the actual unembellished recipe. So in this case, it's the Silver Moon Agent's coat. And then you're just going to gain a bunch of skill. And this is the important thing right here. If you are somebody who's going to use concentration, you're going to want to make sure you max out this node first, because this is going to use 5% less concentration when crafting chest armor. So if you are somebody who is going the concentration route, you're going to want to make sure you max out this node for that 5%. Then of course go into the actual Learned Leatherworker as well as the Concentrated Crafter for all of that concentration. And then you can go back here and start filling it out for skill and all of that. Of course, if you're somebody who's going straight for guaranteed skill, then you're just going to want these 3 main nodes. And then of course, resourcefulness and stuff like that helps as well. But that works for every single slot. So for example, if we wanted the pants right here, we go over here, and when you unlock it, you're going to gain the pants recipe, and then as always, a bunch of skill, and then lastly, that concentration buff at the end as well. So if you are somebody who's going to max out a slot, what you're going to need is 30 points into the main node, another 30 for the middle node, and another 20 for whatever sort of slot you want to do. So that is 60 plus 20, so that is 80 knowledge points total. And then of course, you're going to want to have some profession stat buffs like resourcefulness and things like that. The male one is set up the exact same, so it's going to give you a bunch of skill for everything on the top node. Then you're going to have to figure out what sort of slot you want to do. In this example, let's say we wanted to craft male hands. We go over here, you're going to unlock the recipe, as well as a bunch of skill, and lastly, you'll have that concentration buff at the end as well. But yet again, that's going to be 30 knowledge points, 30 knowledge points, and another 20 for 80 knowledge points total, if that is something that you want to max out. And then for everything else, whether it's reagents, whether it's armor kits, or profession equipment, you're going to want to go into Flawless Fortes. Despite having a lot of recipes under this tree, it is actually very, very simple, where the top node is going to give you a bunch of skill for all of those items. So whether you're basically doing anything besides armor crafting, this is going to be giving you skill towards. So right here, you'll get some other secondary buffs as well, but every time you put in 1 point, you'll gain 1 skill. If you decide to go to the left side of the tree, this is going to be for profession accessories. So as you max this out, you're going to gain resourcefulness, more skill, some other bonus stats, more skill, and at the end, a big plus 20 skill, as well as consuming less concentration. So that is a simple just 30 knowledge points right there. Of course, 30 for the top node as well, so a total of 60 for that build. And then for any sort of reagent crafting, you're going to go to the right side of the tree. The middle node, yet again, is just going to give you a bunch of skill when crafting reagents and consumables, as well as some other different stat bonuses and things like that. And then you have your each specific subnode. Crucial Consumables is going to give you skill when crafting armor kits. So there you gain an armor kit recipe, a bunch of skill, and at the end, you're going to have that concentration buff as well. The middle one is for your basic reagents, so those crafted reagents we first talked about. That's yet again going to give you a bunch of skill plus the concentration buff. And lastly, we have the optional reagents, so this is for those embellishment items that we saw, and yet again, this is going to give you one of the recipes, a bunch of skill, and lastly, concentration. So if you are somebody who, let's say, wanted to go full basic reagents, you would need 30 points in the main node, 30 points in the middle, and 20 in the end for a total of 80 knowledge points, and that would kind of max out your skill, assuming of course you have max overall skill as well as good profession tools. And then because you are mass crafting reagents, multi-craft is going to be very, very important, so you're going to want to make sure you max that out as well. But that's really it for specializations. 2 of the trees are the exact same, just one for leather and one for mail, and everything else is thrown in the 3rd tree, while of course you have your fundamentals of profession stats in the other. So hopefully there won't be any big confusion on, okay, what exactly do I need to put my points into, depending on what sort of recipe you want to craft. But everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Personally, I am probably going to go into reagent as well as armor kit crafting, as I personally just don't do crafting orders, and I also am probably not going to go into embellishment crafting either, so I'll probably stick to just the basic reagents. That did really well for me in the War Within, and then also I'll give armor kits another try as well. But everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. Blacksmithing will be out very, very soon, and then we'll finally be at midnight release. But everybody, thank you guys so much, and as always, have a good day.